I cheated with my daughter's classmate's father during a field trip. My husband found out and knocked out my lover. Now I ended up in ruins and losing my daughter. My name is Valeria. I am 36 years old. I am a primary school teacher. I was always that woman who was dedicated to her family, to her daughter, to her home. I never went out to party, and if someone saw my life from the outside, they would say it was perfect. I have been married for 14 years to Lucas, 39 years old, a financial analyst. He was always a serious, responsible, and hardworking guy. I have never lost anything materially speaking, but emotionally I have felt invisible for a long time. Our relationship became a protocol. We slept in the same bed, but it seemed like there was an abyss between us. Lucas is that quiet, reserved guy. There were never many gestures of affection, and, over time, what little there was lost. I tried to talk, to try to get closer, to suggest therapy, to go out for two. Nothing worked. He would come home exhausted from work, eat dinner in silence, watch television, and sleep. The days became the same, the weeks too. I felt lonely in the marriage, as if I were just an extension of his routine. Love became a habit, and the habit empty. We have a daughter, Luna, who is 9 years old. She is everything to me. I put her in ballet classes at the beginning of the year because she has always been passionate about dancing. Attending rehearsals, doing her hair, participating in school meetings made me feel useful, alive. I was seen there, even if it was through the eyes of other mothers, of my daughter's teachers. It was in this environment that everything started to change. That is where I met Ignacio. Ignacio is the father of a colleague of Luna, a 42-year-old man, separated, charming in an almost dangerous way. He had that intense look, that smile on the corner of his mouth that made you forget where you were. We crossed paths several times at meetings and ballet outings, but it was on a school trip where we finally talked. He was funny, attractive, and immediately praised my way of dealing with children, something I had not heard in a long time. It was not long before he started sending me messages after school meetings. It all started lightly, with jokes, compliments, an emoji here, another there. I knew it was wrong, but I also knew it was the first time in years that I felt desired. It was like a new addiction. The simple fact that someone remembered me, asked me how my day was, praised my outfit, was a drug that I wanted more and more. And the more I got involved, the less I saw a way out. Lucas, my husband, had no idea what was happening. Maybe out of blind trust, maybe out of distraction. I have become an expert in little lies. I said I was going to spend more time with the mothers of the group, that I had a meeting at the school, that I was going to buy a gift for the teacher, and he accepted everything without raising an eyebrow. This, in a way, made me feel even more justified. If he did not care about my absence, why would I feel guilty for seeking presence in someone else? The excursion would be long. 5 days in an ecological park far from the city, organized by the ballet school. The idea was to strengthen the bonds between parents and children with group activities, trails, and overnight stays in a simple hotel. Lucas rejected the invitation without a second thought. He said it was a lot of work and encouraged me to take Luna alone. I understood it as another silent abandonment. I packed our daughter's bags and left with a strange feeling in my chest. I thought it would be just a trip to take care of my daughter. I was so wrong. Ignacio appeared in the hotel lobby upon arrival, with an old backpack on his back and the simplest smile I have ever seen in my life. Within a few minutes, he started a conversation with me and, during the activities, he became increasingly close. We exchanged glances, laughs, veiled provocations. The tension grew every day in the glances, in the accidental touches. I knew what was brewing between us. The second day, at night, after all the children were asleep, I made a decision that changed everything. I did not want to wait any longer. On a trail, while everyone was watching a waterfall, Ignacio came up behind me and made a silly comment in my ear. Something about how pretty teachers should be forbidden from wearing shorts. I should have been offended, but I was not. My body responded before my mind. I laughed, I looked at him, and I realized I was enjoying it. It was not just the compliments, it was the attention, the direct gaze, the way he listened to me as if everything I said was interesting, something Lucas had not done in years. The second day, after the children went to sleep in their rooms, the parents gathered in the hotel cafeteria. Ignacio sat next to me. The school wine began to circulate and the laughter became looser. On a trip to the bathroom, he followed me discreetly. Inside, without saying a word, he pinned me against the wall and kissed me. The hotel was simple, with narrow hallways and rooms next to each other. Ignacio jokingly told me during dinner which room he was staying in. And that night, after the stolen kiss, still with my heart racing and without thinking about the consequences, I knocked on his door. Ignacio pushed me inside without a word. We kissed like two hungry people. He pushed me against the wall. He tore my clothes with the haste of someone who has been waiting for this their whole life. We had sex right there and then we went to bed. He dominated me as I had dreamed for years, without hesitation, without fear, making me feel small, submissive, and desired. He was everything I wanted, someone who would command me and use me with pleasure. I orgasmed so many times that I did not remember it was possible. They were hours of raw, intense pleasure. Ignacio knew exactly what to do with me, how to hold me by the hips, how to bite my skin, how to look me in the eyes and make me beg for more. I returned to my room almost at dawn, with my legs trembling, my lips swollen, and my body still throbbing. I felt alive again, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. I knew what I had done was wrong, but that night none of it mattered. Only the pleasure mattered. After that first night, it became a silent agreement between us. Every night, after the children were asleep, I waited until I was sure that Luna was sound asleep, and I went to Ignacio's room. And every night, without missing a single one, he possessed me in all the ways I had always dreamed of and never had the courage to ask Lucas. We made love standing up, on the floor, in bed, in the bathroom. I gave myself completely. I no longer cared what might happen. It was as if everything else had ceased to exist. During the day, we disguised ourselves. We pretended to be just friendly, complicit parents. No one suspected. I was the devoted mother, the kind teacher, the upright woman. And Ignacio, the attentive father, the funny guy. But at night, we were two savages. Upon returning from the tour, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I had crossed an invisible line from which there was no return. I felt alive, powerful, desired. But deep down, very deep inside, a voice whispered that this happiness would have a price, and it would be loud. When the tour ended, I returned home with my head in the clouds and my body still marked by the 5 days with Ignacio. Lucas greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and asked me if everything had gone well. I replied, yes, as if nothing had happened, but inside I was no longer the same. The woman who returned from that trip was no longer just a wife and mother. She was a lover. She was someone who now knew a kind of pleasure and attention that she had never experienced with her own husband. And she wanted more, much more. Ignacio did not want to wait either. 2 days later, we met in a discreet cafe near the school. We took a walk, exchanged intense kisses in a supermarket parking lot, and he suggested we go to a motel. I did not even hesitate. I made some excuse to meet with colleagues and went. We had sex like crazy, as if the world was going to end. The feeling of urgency, of danger, of doing something forbidden, only made everything more addictive. I left there with messy hair, marks on my body, and a stupid smile on my face. From then on, our meetings became frequent. We used the ballet class schedules as an excuse. When the girls were rehearsing, we would sneak away. Sometimes we went to cheap motels, other times to his house. He lived alone since he separated from his ex-wife. I lied to Lucas as if someone were breathing. I said I was going to help a classmate from school, that I had extra meetings, that Luna was going to sleep over at a friend's house. I was becoming an expert at covering up the betrayal. And, strangely, I did not feel guilty. I felt pleasure. The adrenaline started to make me addicted, more than the sex itself. It was the hide-and-seek game, the complicit glances in the school hallways, the quick touches at parent meetings. I felt powerful. Ignacio called me my Valeria and said he had never met a woman as sexy as me. And I believed him. I started to take better care of myself, to wear more daring clothes, makeup, new lingerie, all for him. And Lucas did not see it, or did not want to see it. He was so absorbed in work that he did not even notice the transformation of his own wife. Over time, I started to relax too much. I left visible messages on my cell phone. I changed the way I talked, my appearance. I was sure that Lucas suspected nothing. I even started to feel angry with him. That is why. How could I realize it? Did he really not care, or was he just too complacent to do anything? These questions haunted me in the few moments of silence, but they were soon drowned out by a new sex, a new lie, a new dose of that addiction called Ignacio. What I did not know was that Lucas's silence hid much more than indifference. As I threw myself headlong into the betrayal, he began to notice small things. The change in my scent, poorly explained absences, the messages I forgot to delete. And still, he said nothing. He did not confront. I just looked. And that was my biggest mistake, underestimating the man who slept next to me, thinking I could play with fire and not get burned. Thinking I could cheat without life ever betraying me. The beginning of the end happened in a banal way. One day, I left my cell phone in the bathroom sink while I was showering. Lucas, by chance, came in to look for something and saw the screen lit up with a notification. It was a message from Ignacio, one of those you should never leave visible. I am counting the hours until I can use you again. He did not respond. He did not wake me up. He did not make a scene. He simply took out his cell phone and read everything. Old conversations, photos, audios. Everything was there. The betrayal was exposed before his eyes. I did not know it at the time. He acted normally for days. The same calm tone, the same measured gestures. Maybe colder, but nothing shocking. Only later did I understand that Lucas had already seen everything. He kept silent, not out of ignorance, but out of strategy. He was deciding how to react. While I continued to live my fantasy with Ignacio, Lucas was planning, observing. And I, blinded by ego and adrenaline, thought that nothing could reach me. I felt invincible, desired, powerful. I was about to be crushed. At this stage, my meetings with Ignacio continued as if nothing had happened. We had sex with even more intensity, as if each time were the last. I thought my life was in balance. A distant husband, a passionate lover, a healthy daughter. I thought I could keep the two worlds separate. But Lucas had already crossed the threshold of doubt. Now he was sure and was just waiting for the right moment to act. He was not an impulsive man. He was a calculating man. The following week, Lucas began to review papers, documents, our contracts. He made long and mysterious calls. He sent messages all the time. I thought it was strange, but I still did not connect the dots until I started to notice small differences. My mother-in-law treated me coldly. A friend of Lucas who always greeted me warmly ignored me at a meeting. It was there that the ice settled in my stomach. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And I could not stop. Lucas was gathering evidence. Fingerprints, conversation traces, copies of photographs, dates, times, location. He knew where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. He was building the castle of my ruin. And I, on this side, continued to delude myself with the idea that I had everything under control. His calm was just the surface of a volcano about to erupt. The anger he carried was not the screaming kind. It was the kind that destroys in silence. I thought I had betrayed a weak man. I had awakened a monster. The day when everything would come to light was closer than I imagined. And I was not going to expose myself by screaming. I was not going to break plates or make huts. I was going to break my stability, my image, my peace. I did not know it, but the bomb had already been planted, And the most terrifying thing, Lucas smiled at me during dinner that night. He poured me wine and asked me how my day was. I answered with my heart racing, but without knowing why. Maybe deep down I already knew. The truth was coming, and it was going to swallow me whole. It was a normal afternoon. Ignacio sent me a message saying that his daughter would be with her grandmother and that I could go to his house without any rush. I made an excuse to Lucas that I was going to help a classmate at school with a project, and I went. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon. I was already anxious, excited just thinking about him waiting for me. I went in, took off my shoes, he kissed me at the door, we went straight to the room. We started right there. We already knew what we all liked. I surrendered with pleasure, with thirst. I was completely wrapped in that bubble of pleasure. The sex was intense, as always. He took me by the wrists, put me face down and took me as I liked it, hard, without asking permission. I felt alive, submissive, desired. Just when we were at our peak, we heard a noise in the room. Ignacio stopped for a second, but I told him, "Leave it, it must be the wind." It was then that the bedroom door flew open, and there was Lucas, standing still, silent, with a baseball bat in his hand. My world stopped. His naked body, his agitated breathing and his gaze, that empty gaze, froze me. Lucas did not say a word. He took 3 steps towards Ignacio and delivered the first blow. A dry crack, Ignacio shouted, but he had no time to react. The second and third blows came quickly. He fell to the floor, groaning, and was soon unconscious. I was in shock. I screamed, I begged, I tried to hold Lucas, but he pushed me with his forearm, not hitting me, but with force. "Get out of the way," he said with a calm that chilled my bones. Then he began to destroy the house. He broke the TV, the glasses, threw Ignacio's cell phone against the wall, all in a sepulchral silence. I stood there, covered only with a sheet, watching the destruction that was happening around me. Ignacio, unconscious on the floor. Lucas told me to call an ambulance while he finished tearing down the whole house. Lucas, with his chest heaving, but without screaming, without swearing. His anger was pure, clean, without loss of control. When he finally stopped, he looked at me and just said, "Your things are in the garage. Tomorrow, the lawyer will send you the papers. If you do not agree with something, especially with the custody of our daughter, I will let the whole town know what you are." That was worse than any slap. His coldness, the clarity, the warning that everything was about to fall apart. I did not cry there. I did not wait for the ambulance to arrive and take my lover to the hospital. So I grabbed my clothes, trembling, got dressed with as much dignity as I could muster, and left Ignacio's house without looking back. On the way home, I sent a message to a friend asking for refuge for a few days. My life, which until then had been built on lies, had suddenly collapsed, and there was no way to rebuild anything. Not even with Lucas, not even with Ignacio, not even with myself. The next day, I found all my things in the garage, in boxes, clothes, shoes, documents, souvenirs, all separated and stacked with surgical precision. Lucas saw me arrive, but he did not open the door. He just let the curtain move, as if he wanted me to know I was being watched. I carried each box with the weight of a shame that seemed physical. No screams, no explanation, just emptiness. A silence more cruel than any public scandal. And I deserved every second of it. After taking my things out of the garage, I went straight to a friend's house who did not even know what was happening. I made up a complicated separation without going into details. I was not yet ready to face the world. Lucas did not call me, did not respond to messages, did not ask for explanations. Total silence. 3 days later, I received contact from the lawyer. The divorce process was already underway. Moreover, he asked for sole custody of Luna. He alleged emotional instability, exposure, and psychological risk for our daughter. I was frozen. I tried to call him, to talk, to explain, to beg. Nothing. He did not respond. I sent a message to my mother-in-law, who had always treated me like a daughter. She replied dryly, "You reaped what you sowed." I felt like an outcast. I began to notice different looks in the streets, whispers when I passed near the school. Lucas did nothing public, but his close circle knew, and that was enough. The mothers from the ballet group cut me off. My school colleagues began to avoid me. My reputation fell silently, without scandal, but in ruins. The worst of all was Luna. When I managed to see her after a week, she was different. Distant gaze, cold hugs. I tried to force the conversation, to joke, to smile, but she seemed resentful. Later I discovered that she heard things, that she understood more than she should, that she saw her father crying locked in his room, who noticed my repeated absence and lies. I tried to justify myself, saying that Lucas was exaggerating, that he was emotionally unstable, that he wanted to get away from her. And that was my fatal mistake. Lucas used this attempt at manipulation against me in the process. He accused me of parental alienation, and with reason. The messages I sent, the audios, even reports from people close to me, everything was attached as evidence. I was called to a tense hearing in which I felt like a monster before the cold gaze of the lawyers. I had to listen to Lucas say, in so many words, that I abandoned his daughter because of a lover and that I tried to turn the child against her own father. And I had no way to answer because it was true. My own family began to distance themselves. My parents, upon learning the details, branded me as irresponsible and ungrateful. My mother cried, saying she could no longer defend me. My father told me he did not recognize me. I started living in a small rented apartment, supported by what little I could get from my school fees and some savings. Without my daughter, without friends, without dignity. Just constant silence around me and the unbearable weight of shame. Now I was the ex-wife who destroyed her own family for a motel affair. My story did not matter. In the first place, it did not matter how empty I felt inside the house. What mattered was the label, the role I played in the social theater of hypocrisy. Lucas came out as the exemplary father, the betrayed husband, the man who suffered in silence. And I, the one who did not know how to value what she had. The exile I began, physically and emotionally, also became a social exile. I was alone and, for the first time, afraid of myself. I thought that at least Ignacio would be on my side. After all, he knew what we were involved in. I knew the risk, I knew the intensity. But when the bomb exploded, he disappeared. At first, he sent me some messages, saying he was scared, that he never wanted to cause so much damage. Then, silence. I started calling, sending messages. He did not respond. And that is when I found out. Ignacio was being investigated at work. Someone, and I never doubted who, made anonymous reports about his office hours. Lucas not only destroyed my image and my family's, but he also destroyed the prince I had idealized. Ignacio worked for a public agency and was accused of being at home or in motels during the shifts he was supposed to be working. The Internal Affairs Department was called. In less than a month, he was suspended and, shortly after, dismissed. His reputation collapsed. His daughter transferred schools. The ex-wife appeared, demanding a review of the pension and custody. Ignacio became a pariah. The man who made me feel alive was now just a specter fleeing from everyone. I tried to find him in person. I went to his house. He did not answer. A neighbor told me he no longer lived there. I suspected he had gone to live with a relative in another city. In fact, I knew it. He was also fleeing from me. Maybe I blamed myself, or maybe I just wanted to erase everything. I started to wonder if, after all, I was just a distraction for him, something momentary. The problem is that for me it became a whirlwind that took everything with it, and he simply swam while I drowned. For weeks, I waited for a call. An apology. Are you okay? Nothing. Ignacio disappeared. Not just my life, but my daughter's life. I felt used, abandoned, foolish. How could I think this would work? What man who abandons his daughter would take care of me? He surrounded me with beautiful words, strong hugs, and empty promises. And I believed. I gave myself body and soul, as if I were a teenager hungry for attention. And now she was here alone, betrayed by both sides. One day, I received a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. She was Ignacio's ex-wife. Brief and direct. If you think he is coming back, forget it. He never loved anyone but himself. That hit the mark. It was the last nail in the coffin of our case. What was left was only the memory. Memory of sweaty bodies, whispered words, and promises turned to dust. I began to feel disgusted, sick of myself, of my need, of my naivety. I had lowered myself and he just left. Ignacio left without looking back and I stayed. I was left with the guilt, the shame, the sideways glances. I was left with the responsibility of trying to rebuild something within myself, but even that seemed impossible. The romance ended just as it began, fast, intense, inconsequential. But this time, what came after was not excitement. It was ruin. His downfall made me realize that there was nothing special about us. It was just a need disguised as passion. And now, not even that remained, only emptiness. Today, I live alone in a tiny 2-room apartment with a constant smell of dampness. The view is of a painted wall. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night not knowing where I am. I still have not gotten used to the silence, with the absence of Luna, with the absence of the routine of the house where I lived for so many years. I sleep badly. I dream of voices, of screams, of slamming doors. I eat badly. I have lost weight. I live on coffee and anxiety. The days are long and the same, and the pain has no respite. I live on small, informal jobs. I sell cosmetics, homemade snacks, sometimes I clean. I used to be a teacher, respected at school, loved by parents. Now I am just another woman who has fallen into disgrace. The few friends I had left drifted away over time, some out of shame, others out of fear of social judgment. Even my mother, despite trying to stay in touch, speaks to me with sadness in her eyes. My father practically excluded me. He said he cannot stand to look at me. And I understand. Therapy was a test. I tried it twice, but I could not continue. The therapist said I needed to rebuild my self-esteem, but how do you do that when you feel terrible every day, when you know you destroyed what you loved most out of need and vanity? Guilt is not something that goes away. It sticks to the skin, in the eyes, without a smell. I go out on the street, and I think everyone knows. That everyone talks about me, even if it is not true. That is how I feel. That is what I see in the mirror. Attempts to get closer to my daughter were disastrous. On rare visits, she remains silent, distant. She does not trust me anymore. And how can you blame a child for this? She saw me lie. She saw me disappear. She saw me fall. Lucas never spoke negatively of me directly, at least not in front of her, but he did not need to. His silence says it all. The posture, the way he protects her from me, as if I were a danger. And maybe I am, an emotional danger, the ghost of a mother she no longer recognizes. I have already thought about leaving here and starting over somewhere else. But that would just be another escape. I have done this all my life. I fled from boredom. I fled from silence. I fled from pain, until it all hit me at once. Today, I pay the price for every lie. Every night, I chose pleasure over responsibility. Every time I looked my daughter in the eyes and said, everything was fine, when it was not. I chose a path that seemed light, but in the end it was an abyss. And now I do not know how to climb back up. Sometimes I find myself looking at old photos. People laughing on the beach. Birthdays. Christmases. Lucas holding Luna on his lap when she was just a baby. I miss what I destroyed, what I threw away as if it were disposable. Today I live with depression, anxiety, insomnia. But worse than all this is loneliness. Not being alone at home, but knowing that no one else wants me around. I became what I was always afraid of being, an irrelevant, forgotten, and hated woman. And the worst part is knowing that I deserve it. Today I understand what karma means, not as something mystical or religious, but as the sum of the consequences you choose to ignore. Every step I took towards betrayal seemed small, harmless, a flirtation, a kiss, a motel, a lie. But all of that was building the ruin that today covers me like a cloak. I was not the victim of anyone but myself. I dug my own hole, and now I live inside it. There is no right to complain, with no one to share the cold with here. Lucas was my biggest loss. Not the husband himself, because he was already distant before everything, but the loyal man, the devoted father, the silent companion who endured more than necessary. He did not scream, he did not hit me, he did not curse me. He simply tore me out of his life as if he were pulling out a bad tooth, with precision, in pain, but without hesitation. And that is why it hurts so much, because he was right. Because he did what I did not have the courage to do, cut off what was slowly killing me. My daughter is the cruelest reflection of all. She looks at me as if I were a stranger, and maybe I am. I have tried to regain your trust, but every attempt seems like a step back. I broke the purest bond that existed between us, and, in doing so, I also broke a part of her. That is what weighs on me the most, knowing that I left scars on such a small heart, and that these scars will accompany her forever. She deserved more, much more than a selfish mother seeking validation in the body of another man. Ignacio was just the trigger, a man who appeared at the right time for someone at the wrong time. Today, I think he was not even the real problem. He was the symptom, the consequence of a series of emotional holes that I pretended not to see. But still, I had the option not to feed my chaos, and I chose to dive into it with him. He ran away when I needed him most. And maybe he did the right thing, because what we had was not love. It was escape. It was an illusion. It was poison disguised as affection. I learned that there is no betrayal without victims, even when it seems it is just between two consenting adults. There will always be someone who will bleed. And almost always, someone is innocent. Lucas bled. My daughter bled. And in the end, I bled more than all of them. But my pain does not generate empathy, only repulsion. And with reason. Cheating is stealing someone's option to live with the truth. And I did this to those who least deserved it. Today I understand why I am alone. Because no one wants to be near someone who has already hurt them so deeply. If I could go back in time, would I do everything differently? Yes, but I cannot. Time is relentless and life cannot go back. So I just exist, one day after another, paying for every choice, missing what I myself destroyed, and living with the echo of a life that no longer exists. This is my story. There is no redemption, no forgiveness. Just the naked truth of someone who lets themselves be carried away by desire, by lack, by blindness.